You're listening to Southern Miss Radio. It's time for News You Need. News You Need is a look at current events and how they affect the college community and beyond. And now here's the host of News You Need, Dr. Ed Simpson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another exciting edition of News You Need. This is the show where we talk with our amazing USM students about what's going on in their information worlds. And of course, the reason we care is that news is the weather report for your society. It's the idea of looking at the issues that are coming at us as a community. And because we live in a democratic society, the folks out there who vote are supposed to help make those decisions anyway, and that's why we care about what the issues that we have to deal with, what are potential solutions, and then, of course, who do we put in charge of making sure that those solutions happen. So, of course, this week, very exciting. This is the last show before the election, and we have been talking all semester about the election, how it's affecting our students, and what issues are important to our USM students in this most important of presidential election years. So, panel, you're pretty familiar by now with the procedure, so go ahead and introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll get going.
I'm Lillian. I'm the producer of the show, senior communications major. Yeah. That's about it.
Okay.
About ready to
I'm going to ask our
now.
engineer. Are we hearing her through? Okay, I'm getting a nod. Okay.
Okay, good. My name is Liam. I'm returning back to this show once again. I really love doing it. I'm a political science and Spanish major. I'm a freshman, and I'm from Clinton, Mississippi, and I love politics.
Excellent. Okay, so Lillian, you're going to graduate in December.
Yes.
What do you want to do? What are you looking at?
I really want to sleep. I want to take like a week to like refresh on life because I'm burnt out.
I hear you.
Especially doing like back-to-back summer semesters. It's just been.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
Now, are you graduating a semester early or a semester late?
Semester early.
Early.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there you go. But now it is time to sleep.
Yeah.
And what do you want to do for a paycheck?
Well, I recently got my certified personal training license, whatever it's called.
Okay.
So, I started off as a business major here and switched to communication studies. So I think I'm going to try to incorporate those and then throw in personal training and like have my own business.
Wow.
And, yeah.
Wow. So are you like an athlete?
I am not an athlete. The most athletic thing I've done in my youth was probably like majorette dance. I did flag for a little while.
But personal training. Okay, so you take like an old person like me and you get them in shape. Is that the idea?
Yes, basically.
Okay, wow. Okay, well, that sounds really hard and painful. Okay, and what do you want to do at the end of the day? So you're a freshman. Your journey is just beginning.
I'm just getting started.
What do you want to do when you walk across that stage as a newly minted Eagle graduate? What do you want to do?
So the dream has always been to go to law school. That's kind of been the dream. And throughout the process, I've come across things that I've really come to like. I added Spanish to my major. And because I speak Spanish and I'm a Spanish court interpreter, and I really love interpreting.
Really?
And so I spend a lot of time interpreting. I work for a call center. And so I'm really busy on that end. And so at the end of the day, I still think that I'm going to pursue litigation, pursue being a lawyer. But I really do hope to have an emphasis with Hispanics and the Hispanic community.
Wow. Well, I think that's absolutely needed, right? Normally when folks tell me they want to be a lawyer, I go, does the world really need another attorney? But when you put it in the context of immigration law, of helping Hispanic folks who may not have a mastery of the language through the legal system, that's a high calling, a noble art, and certainly well needed in our society. So I love that. That's amazing.
Much.
Okay, so fellers, what are our USM students talking about? We are 4 days out. It's hard to believe, but we are 4 days out from the election of 2024. What was on the minds of our USM students?
I heard a couple people mention that they plan on going home this weekend to do absentee voting. So, so I'm kind of excited for them. I'm happy that they're taking the time out to go do that.
Yeah, and also, I mean, Halloween. Aside from everything
Yeah.
else, like news that's going on. I mean, everyone's talking about Halloween, which is pretty cool. Also, the theater, the school of, I think it's the School of Theater and Arts, if I'm not mistaken. They have a play going on this
They do.
weekend,
I'm going. I'm
and
going tomorrow night.
and so
It's very
I'm
exciting.
also gonna try
Yeah.
to go because we
Yeah.
have a couple of people in Lucky Day that are going. So it's gonna be going until Sunday. The last show is Sunday at 2 o'clock.
Yeah. So I try to go to several plays a year. Never disappointed. If anybody saw The Addams Family last year, that may have been the
was
single
not
best
here,
play I've
but-
ever seen. That was
Oh,
pretty
I thought you
amazing.
were talking about the actual movie.
Oh no, this was a play. It was a really amazing. Yeah. So I'm feeling that our students are kind of wishing the election was over.
Yeah, I mean, everyone gets, hyped up in the beginning. There's like a big focus. Everyone's super excited. And now it's like so close that it's just, everyone's like, eh. But today, I will say, in Lucky Day, the mayor came and he gave some awesome insight. He's kind of like where I am, where he's not super far on either side. He's more of like an independent. But he was talking about how he does lean more conservative. But sometimes he's just like, man, why would you do that? Or why do Mississippi legislators do this? And they are Republicans. And so just because you're part of a party doesn't mean that you support everything that's going on. But he talked about the election and what it looks like. And he says right now that there are two main reasons why Trump is probably going to win. And it's because Kamala is falling behind, not in the polls necessarily this year behind Trump, but she is falling behind where Hillary Clinton was, and Hillary Clinton lost, and she's falling behind where Joe Biden was. Well, Joe Biden did win, but she's pulling behind both of them right now, which doesn't look super good. And then also in the process of picking her as their candidate, whenever there's chaos in that, it usually doesn't transfer well, and they usually end up losing in November. But early polling, he said, does show promise for Kamala that she might win. So he gave two reasons why Trump might win and one why Kamala might win. So it was really cool.
It really is
class.
interesting. Well, of course, the mayor, I think you're referring to Toby Barker,
Yes,
mayor of
Toby
Hattiesburg. Toby is a well-known figure. If anything, I would say he leans slightly left. He is very much in the center. I mean, he takes, I think, some great pride in saying he's independent.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if you're going to get elected in Hattiesburg, you pretty much have to say you're independent because it's very difficult for a Democrat to win, but also very difficult for a Republican to win.
Yeah.
It's just the way it goes. So really interesting. Okay. Lillian, any? Are you hearing is your circle talking about who's going to win?
I think my circle is really ready for everything to be over with. I think like we all played our part in, going to the polls to vote. But now it's just like it's kind of out of our hands now. Like, we did our part. We just gotta wait.
That's that idea of it being out of our hands at this point is really interesting. I think there's a lot of folks about that. Have you guys seen? Excuse me, the news. Excuse me, the news stories on election anxiety.
No, I haven't.
I
So imagine it exists,
there's a. Actually, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna pick up with the idea of election anxiety on the other side of the break.
Sponsorship comes from American Graphics. Located at 8 Commercial Warehouse Drive in Hattiesburg, American Graphics provides custom screen printing and embroidery. They can be reached by phone at 601-602-2277. And the website is goamericangraphics.com. American Graphics, printing at its finest. If you or your business is interested in sponsoring programming on WUSM, we'd love to talk to you about the benefits and opportunities. You can get recognition for your business as well as the appreciation of the WUSM audience. The audience realizes your support provides the programming they listen to daily. In addition, our sponsorship rates are very cost-effective and tax-deductible. To learn more, call 601-266-4287.
Yeah, so we were talking through the break a little bit about Toby, and maybe we can invite him on the show one day. That's not really what we do. We prefer talking to students, but Toby is a well-known figure. I know Toby a little bit. He likes doing things, and I think in many ways the electorate is much happier when their politicians are talking about what they're doing than about the issues that divide us. And I think so. Toby's kind of got that dialed in here in Hattiesburg. but certainly not on the presidential election level. So this idea of election anxiety, right? So there's been a lot of reporting in the last couple of weeks or so about how there is a large segment of the population that is pretty much where Lillian is, which is they're done, they're ready for it to be over, but at the same time, they are becoming increasingly anxious over the outcome. So what is the world going to look like? What is the United States going to look like, depending on whether Kamala wins or whether Trump wins? So are our students, are they thinking about that? Is that a kind of a post-election, oh my gosh, or?
It's like you're watching me to talk right. I think from a student perspective, I think we're more worried about, especially me. I mentioned on one show that I was on, my mom told me I was graduating right on time to still be eligible for the loan forgiveness thing. So I think that is a big thing that's playing into a lot of people's, decision on like not so much a decision, but anxiety of like, what is my life going to look like after the election is over with. And I also feel like we don't want another COVID. I really feel like we do not want another COVID situation. And I don't think a lot of people want a president back in office that has a lot of cases out on him right now. So I think it's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's giving me anxiety.
Yeah,
thinking about it now.
Especially going back to the outcome, it is very interesting. We actually were discussing this in my honors class. We were talking about the outcome if Trump loses and the possible turn of violence, because as we're already seeing, ballot boxes are being burned, etc. And now like I've said before, I'm more right-leaning, I'm more conservative. I think that less government control is better because, in the long run, it might save you from some issues and things you don't want. But at the same time, it doesn't justify, burning ballot boxes. It doesn't justify radical behavior. And so sadly, that radical behavior is something that people are fearing. And I think that that's a lot of it is if he loses, people are scared of the outcome. They're scared of possibly violence. But then there are also people that are worried just about policy. And so, but recently this week, because of the ballot box burnings, et cetera, a lot of people have been talking about the January 6th incident. So it's kind of been resurfacing. So maybe that might be some of the anxiety.
I think there's some of that. I think that I personally am not worried about violence after the vote. I think that's a very, very small minority of folks. Now, it doesn't take that many to cause real problems, but I'm just not worried about that. But I do think the anxiety does, and I think a lot of people have it, and I think a lot of it is not talked about. But what does the country look like if you were to truly deport even 1 million human beings? What does that do to the soul of the country? I mean, and how does that work? Because Trump is talking about detention camps, right? Finding folks who are here undocumented, putting them in detention camps while they're waiting to be sent back home, right? What does that do to the soul of the country? What does that do to our daily existence and how we look at ourselves, right? So I hear a lot of talk about things like that. So depending on who wins, what does the country look like afterwards?
I think that's a great question and a great concern. While I was in Canada, I actually wasn't here for this, but there was a mass deportation of some sort in Florida. And so they thought it was a great idea. They were all for it. And then when it happened, everything shut down. Construction stopped. All of your workers, your cleaners, etc., majority Hispanics, but also other cultures, there are other ethnicities. And then they decided to repeal it and say, hey guys, look, not a great idea. Come back and we'll give you a stipend if you come back. And so that from a logistic side of things and getting things done, I think that the work ethic isn't maybe as phenomenal as it used to be. And matter of fact, it's more expensive to bring people, even if you do it legally, it's more expensive. You actually have to pay more taxes if you bring someone in. So I think that, yes, everyone would prefer if Americans would just work, but that's not quite the case. And there are other people that are willing to do it and work harder for less money. Now, the process of getting them papers, I think that that's something that should be looked at as well, because undocumented immigrants, according to the ITEP, we looked at it this week, It's $11.74 billion worth of Social Security that they pay under fake Social Security numbers. So they actually are contributing to our Social Security fund, which is barely hanging by a thread.
Well, that is exactly right.
I think the idea of like detention centers, it takes me like it immediately took me back to like Adolf Hitler. Like, what type of power is like Trump really trying to gain from like this election? So that's another concern that like you just placed on me. So I think that should definitely be looked at. And even like you mentioning, like a lot of Hispanic workers are doing the jobs that Americans refuse to do. So I think taking them out or like trying to send them back to their country or whatever like that, I think that's going to cause more problems than it helps. Mainly because a lot of these people that are coming in, they don't even cause a lot of problems. Like, I know there's some low income areas in different states or whatever like that where they may be causing problems, but when you look at it on a United States scale, it's very minor. Like, very minor. Like, it's barely even noticeable, but it just, I feel like it's more of a power thing now. Like, if he gets back into office, he's going to be like, yeah, I don't want these people here for whatever reason. And they're trying to do what every other American is trying to do, which is like make a better life for themselves and their children.
I will say in places like Colorado, there's actually, me and my parents were talking about this not too long ago. There's an apartment complex in Colorado, and I think it was in Denver. And there's a Venezuelan gang, and they've completely overran the apartment.
Okay,
and
that is not true.
It's not.
It's not true.
Okay.
There is a videotape. It's been out for about 6 weeks now.
I think that's the videotape, the original one.
It is true. These Venezuelan gang members knocking on doors, and it may be they were harassing some residents, but they have not taken over the apartment complex.
Well, just like them being there with arms.
Now that you could argue.
Yeah,
right?
that and I think that is a concern. But like you said, it is pocketed. But in situations like that, I think that there should be obviously some sort of process for that so that those types of things don't happen. They happen with American citizens as well. There's plenty of American citizens that do that. But there are certain people, like with El Salvador, when they deported tons of people, everyone came to California. That's how MS-13 got here. And so then they all got sent back to El Salvador. And now Nayib Bukele has put all of them in one of the largest jails in the world called the CICOT. And El Salvador is now on the rise. I think it's the second safest country in the Americas right now. And so he's completely turned it around. But I mean, obviously that wouldn't be possible here.
Well, yeah, it's so the last week of the campaign is always a little nutty, and the candidates always go a little bit to the extreme. But so New York Times has been doing a bunch of stories. So for instance, J.D. Vance was on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Also,
do you guys listen to Joe Rogan?
No.
Not really, no. I did watch some of the Trump. I did watch some of the Trump one.
Yeah,
he was on last. Yeah, that was last week.
Yeah,
it was last Friday.
So Joe Rogan, it's really interesting. Is the #1 podcaster in the world.
Oh, he's #1 now.
#1.
Wow.
He has, I forget, something 100 million listeners.
Wow.
It's a little crazy. And the only reason I know Joe Rogan at all is from the Fear Factor. Do you guys, if you're young for that
also,
show.
He's really involved with UFC. Like,
is he?
Really involved.
Yeah,
like him and Dana White are like best
gotcha.
buds.
So, but for some reason, he has captured the listening public. I don't understand it, but he does. So on Joe Rogan's, it's a very long podcast. It's like a 3-hour podcast.
Yeah, the Trump one's also 3 hours.
And so JD was on there. So this is the headline that the New York Times ran. Teens become trans to get into Ivy League schools, according to JD Vance. So what do you think? So Lillian's shaking her head. So what do you think of that kind of rhetoric?
I mean, I think I need more like context of like everything that was said, because I've heard stories about students, wanting to get into these Ivy League schools, but they know like if they go in just as they are, they're going to get looked at like, oh, okay, I'm looking at your actual academics. But if I pose as a trans person, male or female, I can get them for discriminating against me now, so they have to let me in. So it's a sensitive topic, I guess you can say, because there are actual people out here that are trans male, trans female, that are trying to get in those Ivy League schools just to better their education. But there are also people out here with some twisted minds that are like, okay, well, I'm just gonna do this because I got a better chance
Really?
of getting
Yeah,
in.
I actually completely agree with that. I think that we would need a little bit more context. I don't think that it's a great general thing to umbrella everyone into and say, just because you're trans, you're trying to get into an Ivy League.
Yeah.
So if it was going that way, I would say, like there are people that just decide to do that. But
You need a
I,
transcript
I,
of his show.
Well, no, it's
but I
so
do
if you
know
read the
people that do that on their applications.
Yeah.
I mean, they will.
They put
they'll-
other-
Okay,
they will
you guys
pull
are
anything.
surprising me a little bit. I have a little surprise. So the bigger context. So the bigger context is, this was within a stream of anti-trans rhetoric from J.D. Vance. So he's very dismissive of the whole idea of being transgender, right? And so the idea of you were born this this sex and you're changing to this other sex. So he's very dismissive of that whole issue, that whole dialogue. And that comment was within that context. So how do our USM students feel about the whole trans idea and what public policy that involves transgender?
I don't think we have any like real like anti-trans ideas, because I feel like USM has made it very welcoming for all students. Even though in this recent semester, they changed some words in, so I think USM has made it, possible for trans students or like LGBTQ plus community members feel very welcome. And just being a part of Generation Action here on campus, we make sure like we put different events on where those people feel welcomed and safe. So I don't think we have any like negative views on them. Like everybody can have their own opinion, but we don't voice it a lot.
Well, what do you think about one of the vice presidential candidates? Okay, you know what? We're going to take a break, and we'll pick up actually with the transgender issue on the other side.
Look through your children's eyes to see the true magic of a forest. It's a storybook world for them. You look and see a tree. They see the wrinkled face of a wizard with arms outstretched to the sky. They see treasure in pebbles. They see a windy path that could lead to adventure. And they see you, their fearless guide through this fascinating world.
Find a forest near you and start exploring at discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Okay, we are back, and so this idea of, and now I will say I'm old enough. Of course, I'm extraordinarily old. I'm very, very old, very, very creaky and old. But when I was your age, and really up until probably about 12 or so years ago, politicians were very careful about what they said and very careful not to offend anybody. This has changed completely. So now the goal of the game is to defend certain people or offend certain people.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way to get credence with your base, is that if you're going out intentionally to offend other human beings. So it's a really interesting kind of dynamic in our politics. So you're saying that the trans thing, is that a problem, what J.D. Vance said, or you kind of understand that there's this debate out there?
I think that it's warranted in a very specific conversation, and the one like we were talking about, yes. But to umbrella something like that, like for example, for me, so I have my beliefs, and I believe that marriage is between, because I'm a very religious person, so I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. However, I also believe in respect and something called agency. And agency is God's greatest gift to us. That you can do whatever you want, and I can do whatever I want. So you may choose to do something different than me, and that's okay. I'm going to respect you, and I'm not going to judge, because that also is a huge part of it. So I think that that is really important, that you and I can be great people, and you can do something and I can do something, and we can be on different ends of the spectrum, but we can agree to disagree. And I think that's where our civilization is kind of falling apart. Have your beliefs, but don't turn it into some sort of hate speech just because you don't like it.
Well, so okay, well that's interesting. Well, I think we do have to talk about at some point, not this show. We'll talk about the university support of trans and gay LGBTQ folks. I think that's an important issue for us. But speaking of this idea of hate speech, right? So at a Trump rally, there was a comedian that talked about Puerto Ricans as garbage.
I saw that.
Did you guys catch that coverage?
I saw that,
Then Joe Biden comes back in his own videotape statement and calls Trump supporters garbage. Did you guys catch that?
I didn't catch that.
I didn't catch that.
So, and of course, he put out a statement immediately that said, I wasn't referring to all Trump supporters as garbage. I was referring to the comedian who made that comment as garbage. So then you have this, this thing going on.
Interesting rhetoric. Yeah, I think that is, I mean, there are sometimes, like the mayor said today, it's like, great, but why would you say that? I mean, like, I understand, like, maybe we see eye to eye on a couple policies, but, like, why would you say that? Like, come on, you know, and, like, speaking from, you know, a Hispanic side of things is, like, I've, the last 2 years, been really, really involved in Hispanic communities, and stuff like that is taken very seriously.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what I took.
It's taken
reading between the
very
lines.
seriously. Yeah. That stuff is, I mean, you can't say that and expect to get their votes, which is very difficult.
Yeah.
So it might come back to bite them.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I would encourage everybody to go out there, kind of look, you know, take all the coverage with a little bit of grain of salt. Everybody right now is trying to get their attention, their last 10 seconds of attention before the election. So there's another headline out there about Trump saying that he's going to protect women whether they like it or not.
To what extent?
There you go. So that's the whole idea. So anyway, thank you, panel. Another exciting show, and I believe we'll come back next week. I'm sure we'll have an election wrap up. So it's going to be very exciting. So please join us for that. This has been a production of Southern Miss Student Media. Our producer is Lillian Scott, who we're gonna. We only got her another 6 weeks or so. It's very, very sad, but exciting for her. Our videographer is Blake Lawrence, and our engineer is Triderica Winters. We will be back next week.
This has been News You Need with Dr. Ed Simpson. News You Need airs Friday afternoon at 12:30 on Southern Miss Radio.